It's great to welcome Alex Derbes back to our speakers here, back to campus, sort of at least virtually. Alex and I participated in an event about a couple weeks ago for the Alumni Association, and that was a lot of fun. And so we hooked him into doing some work today with our speaker series. And so, Alex, it's great to see you again. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you guys about anything you want to talk about.
Awesome. And for those that are joining for the first time, our sessions are always student moderated, and we have Aditya Thakur. Is that how you pronounce your last name? Thakur?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, great. So Aditya is an undergraduate student, actually also participating in our remote entrepreneurship project program. And Alex was very nice enough to support through his donations some of our students this summer. So Aditya is working with a startup this summer and is a weatherhead and computer science major. Is that correct, Aditya?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a weatherhead finance major and a computer science major.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing that. So I will turn it over to Aditya, who's going to run the show. For those that are on Zoom or on Facebook Live, just let Aditya know either through the chat here on Zoom or raise your hand, or if you're on Facebook Live, just put a question that you'd like him to ask Alex, and we will go from there. So with that, Aditya, over to you.
Hi, I'm Aditya. Again, I'm a finance major and a computer science major. I'm a rising sophomore. And again, if you have any questions, as Michael said, you can just raise your hand and I will ask that to Alex. So to begin on, Alex, can you just tell us about your journey from college to how you came to be where you are right now?
Yeah, sure. I think everybody's, what's the line from Anna? Everybody's path's unique, but so I graduated from Case, I studied computer science, and was writing software. And then this investment firm that I still work for, Gilder, we had a research group in California, and I got hired into that. And our goals out there were to kind of like download as much information, figure out different ways to track things, and then write software to process as much, really large data sets, and try to analyze it and figure out, how to predict company performance and figure out the ways the world was changing and things that we should be investing in. And then kind of as that wound down, I decided to try my hand at being a portfolio manager. I've been doing that for about 10 years now. So now I'm really taking, whatever understanding I do have about how technology works and applying that to the task of trying to find great investments for our clients.
Yeah. So you said you started out with engineering. Is there any engineering projects that you liked a lot, or something that you took like dear to your heart?
What do you mean?
Like something that you're really passionate about when you're doing engineering, right when you got out of college?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I really like figuring out how the world works. And, the big trends that, obviously like the internet is the big thing. And, every time we think that like it was the big thing last year and there's gonna be another big thing, it turns out that it's just the internet's still the big thing, and that, it's probably another 10 or 20 years of that, working through how stuff works. So yeah, I mean, I guess communications has really been the thing that I've been, the most doggedly obsessed with, the entire time. And that, has lots of splinters into other things. But, this idea of, from people not being connected to being connected, and everybody has a supercomputer in your pocket and, a screen and a camera and all of these other things, in the end, I think what we're just seeing is that it changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yesterday we talked about how portfolio management has not been changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but you did say you did have some struggles. Would you like to talk about how COVID has changed your job like at all, or are there any differences that you saw?
Yeah, like the firm's adjusted pretty well. About 100 people work for the firm. We've got about 80 back office staff and then about 20 who do what I do. We've adapted perfectly well to like entering trades and, the day-to-day stuff. But, what we've really realized that we're struggling with is, this process of finding new ideas. Because, so much of it, what we've done historically is we go to conferences, we meet people, we talk to them, and a lot of it's just serendipity at the end. And, and it's a lot harder to engineer that over Zoom than I think that's what we've been struggling with, and we're we now have to be much more intentional about that, and we're trying to adjust to that as best as we can.
Have you seen any different hiring practices going on, or the hiring practices are always the same, continuous throughout?
Our hiring practices haven't changed yet. I think we will figure out that we need to adopt to that, but we're small enough that all of our hires are bespoke enough that we wouldn't even really notice a difference in the practice for a couple of years. But the bigger companies that I talk to, the Facebooks, the Googles, the other people, I think there is a big change there. And as we've gone from this expectation of being in the office to this, maybe it's not perfect, but it's not terrible. All of these companies are talking about hiring more people outside of the big city centers like San Francisco and New York. And they're not. I think both Sundar and Mark Zuckerberg were very clear about this. They're not doing it to save money. They're doing it to access talent pools that otherwise weren't available to them, because not everybody wants to live in those big cities.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, because my father is also, he works in Accenture, and he was talking about how hiring practices have changed a little bit in Accenture too. That's why I asked the question, because about it. So, and as you said before, that you went from engineering to portfolio management. What companies do you trade with? Do you trade with only public companies, or do you trade with private companies too?
Yeah, so our firm, the way it's structured is we have about 10,000 clients, and each of those are just individual, normal people. And, those people, what they show up for is most investment firms, they've got a bunch of rich people, and the number one goal of those rich people is I want to stay rich. And that's not what we do. What we do is we have normal individual people, and they come to us because they want to give us a small amount of their money, and they want to try and get rich. And that kind of ends up, there's kind of two reasons that leads us into staying with public company investments and not doing much on the private side. The first thing is that a lot of our clients aren't qualified institutional buyers to invest in a private company in the United States. You need to have, don't quote me on this, I think it's $200,000 a year in income and $10 million, I don't know, it's some amount, $2 million of net worth or something. And a lot of our clients don't meet that. And then the other thing is, if you're investing in private companies, really what you're spending a lot of your time on is just asking for permission to invest. And that's not who I am. It's not who we are. We want to figure out what the great investments are, and then we don't really want to have to ask permission. And if you're in the public markets, I could show up and I just did this last week, buy 10% of somebody's company. I don't have to call them. I don't have to talk to them. I don't have to tell anybody else what I'm doing. I just tell the traders I want to buy it, and off we go.
So it's pretty much what you decide what goes in what you're doing right now, right?
I'm sorry?
It's pretty much, it's like what you want to do, you can do, and you don't have to ask anyone else to do it.
Yeah, and that's a huge difference between the VC community and the public market investment side is, the big VC firms, everybody knows what the good deals are, and, really they're beating each other up trying to get permission to be the person to write the check to the hot whatever. And in the public market side, you don't have to do any of that.
Can you talk about what you're currently doing right now at all?
Yeah, so I could talk about, like, if there's something on our 13F, so it's publicly, there's filing that, we and every other large investment firm files, lists what we hold. So if you ask me specific questions about what's on the 13F and, why we own something, I can certainly go through that. The compliance is very sensitive about, they don't want me to talk about something that, I can talk about something we just sold, so we're not involved anymore, especially one that's, been a terrible mistake and gone to zero, because I know you can't buy it. So I can do that if you like.
Yeah, I have a question from Cooper Lyons. Cooper, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask the question to Alex, you can.
Oh, sure. Sorry. So what advice would you give a young entrepreneur in the age of COVID when so many small businesses and new businesses are failing? And along with that, what industries would you recommend becoming more well-versed in as the world and the economy is adapting to this pandemic?
Entrepreneur, COVID, and adapting to the pandemic. Look, the pandemic is, I don't think if you're starting something now, it's probably a great time to start stuff because the world's changing really fast. And, hopefully as an entrepreneur, what you're doing is you're betting on change and you're betting on, big markets coming to what you're going to build. So look, the pandemic should just help you out. Like maybe finding capital is a little bit more difficult or something like that. But, if you've got a good idea, it should just happen more quickly now. And I think the second portion of that is just even more true. Like, what we're seeing is that all of these trends, be it, the death of linear television, medicine moving online, the Zoom call, all of this other stuff that was probably going to happen anyway over the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It's happening over the next 3 months. And so I think there's, huge, rich, fertile ground from, and if you just look at Zoom, like in February, my mom didn't know how to use Zoom. And now everybody knows how to use Zoom. And, one business that I'm pretty deeply involved with is the solar industry. And it's completely transformed the solar industry because the sales process in the solar industry used to be salesperson goes in, they sit down at the kitchen table, they talk to the husband and the wife, and they convince them why they should buy the solar system. And now they know with like 94% certainty that the husband and the wife know how to use Zoom, and all the sales has moved online. And sure, they're not closing as many deals. Maybe they're closing a quarter of them instead of a third of them, but they can do twice as many calls in the same day. So their efficiency's actually gone up a lot. And I think that basic application of the use of technology is accelerated is true across essentially the entire economy. And if you pick the thing that was the most stuck, maybe it's medicine, maybe there's something even more stuck than medicine, and you go poke at that, there's probably a lot of opportunity there because in these moments when things get unstuck, there's opportunity for the new people to innovate and deliver value because all of a sudden people are hungry for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So Alex, going off from what you just said, what do you think the next big thing is investing or in the world right now that might come up or be the next big thing in next 2, 3, or 4 months?
Next 2, 3, 4 months. Hopefully we'll all get through these very difficult, divisive political times and recover from the virus. That's my goal for the next few months.
Yeah, but as you said, right, nobody knew anything about Zoom 2 ago. So after the pandemic, what do you think the next big thing might be? Like after the pandemic is gone, maybe a year later.
I think you're going to see, these trends around, look, if you look at like why the stock market's done well since the pandemic, a lot of the companies that are big in the stock market are big tech companies. They've gotten really big. They're overweighted in the indexes and they're actually doing just fine. Some of them are doing really, really well. And they're doing really, really well because the acceleration of our behavior has moved online faster than it was before. So there's been this acceleration in all of that. I think that, the next trend is going to be find the things that were the most resistant to online for whatever structural reasons. And, now that's been knocked loose. And, I think healthcare is one of the ones where, it's going to be radically different in 2 or 3 years because of this thing and probably for the better.
Mm-hmm. I see Nathan has a question. Nathan, if you can unmute yourself and ask Alex the question.
Hi, Alex. My name is Nathan, and I'm a software engineer in the autonomous vehicle space. And I was wondering what traits or what parts of your engineering background are most helpful for your portfolio management?
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday, actually. Like, I think that, engineering is very much a modern liberal arts degree. And I think the ability to write programs and analyze data with programs is absolutely invaluable. The ability to understand technology is absolutely invaluable. But also just the way you think about problems in engineering, especially the tight cycle times between, just understanding your own biases, because, especially when you're writing software, you try something, and then 5 minutes later, you've compiled it, you've tested it, if you've tried or failed, and you learn about your own biases, and you learn about when you make mistakes, and you learn about that feeling of what it feels like to really get something right, and what it really feels like to make a mistake. And if you're building companies, maybe you get to try 4 or 5 or 10 companies in your entire career. Well, if you're building software, you get to do that in an hour. So it's just a great place to learn about yourself and how to analyze problems and how to think about debugging stuff. This isn't quite what you asked, but I think the one thing that classical engineering programs don't really teach, which I think is incredibly valuable, is communications and how to communicate. And the ability to clearly convey concisely in a narrative form is incredibly powerful. And my wife's a history PhD, and she likes to say that if you can write well, you win. And it's totally true. If you can take a complex piece of information and distill it down to a page that people enjoy reading, you're going to win. And if you put that together and you focus on that, and you put that together with how to think about engineering and how to understand technology, I think you've got some real assets.
That was an excellent answer. I believe that too. Efficient communication is always a win. I think Michael has a question.
Great. Thanks, Aditya. Alex, I wonder, a lot of what we do, even with part of these sessions and our students, is sort of talk about the power of networking. I'm sort of curious, as you think about sort of your own evolution doing the work that you do and sort of building networks, like how important is it when you're doing due diligence and sort of learning about companies? How do you use your network to kind of reach out? And sort of what advice do you have? And we have a lot of students that are on here that are sort of building up networks for the first time. Sort of any tips for sort of our younger folks about how to sort of think about building their own networks?
Yeah, I certainly rely on that as much as possible. I also just pay people. I hire experts. We do a lot of that, and it's very effective because if I'm investing in batteries, I'll find somebody who managed, this is an actual example, managed the battery supply chain for Tesla until 4 months ago, and I'll just call her up and hire her, and that's very effective compared to my own personal network because I get somebody who's laser focused on the particular question that I'm trying to answer. But look, I think that making connections is incredibly valuable, and this is probably something that case students are not as good with because of all of our collective mentality. But the number one thing is don't be shy. Ask people about themselves. Ask interesting questions. Figure out what does this person do? What am I curious about? And if you're deeply curious about something that somebody does and that they're proud of, and you ask them about it, they probably want to talk to you about it. And that's a really good way to start a conversation. So that's what I do. I'm a deeply curious person. So, you put me next to somebody on an airplane and I'm probably just going to be like, so what do you do? Oh, you sell concrete. What's that business? I was talking to somebody about car washes the other day. And yeah, ask questions. And don't be afraid to always, if you have something you think is a stupid question, definitely ask that. Absolutely ask that. You don't go 1 second further without asking that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about car wash yesterday, how car wash with technology will be the next new thing and the big thing.
Totally. Who was asking about robotics? Car washes and robotics, it turns out it's an incredibly profitable market and there's a ton of money there and the need for robotics is huge.
So you're telling me to build a car wash?
Robotic car washes, you heard it here.
Yeah, so I should build a new robotic car wash. So yeah, I have a question from LinkedIn Live. The question says, hi everybody, Mitch Webb here, 5th year management major focusing on innovation and entrepreneurship. For Alex, could you discuss your experience founding etool.com? Any specific lessons you took from that?
Yeah, so that was a startup that I started with some other people from Case actually as well. It didn't end well. I mean, we really didn't know what we were doing. We raised some money because it was the first .com cycle, so it was easy to raise money. We had some ideas, but we really had no idea how to execute. It was entirely, a complete failure. I learned an incredible amount, but lessons I learned. I learned a lot of things about what not to do. But yeah, it's ancient history at this point. So this is 1999 and 2000.
So learning from failure and then making yourself much better.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't know how to say her name. Siana has a question for you. Gentiana, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, close enough. Gentiana. So I wanted to ask Alex, how, I think he touched on this a bit during his talk, but I wanted to just kind of ask him, how do you think this pandemic will affect the tech and business world, entrepreneurship, long after this pandemic is gone? Like, what do you think are those practices that will remain and those practices that will be changed just forever?
Look, I think it's probably more valuable for me to turn around and ask you guys that than for you to ask me that. I don't know that I have any special insight into that, but look, everybody has a normalcy bias, and all of this Zoom stuff has become the normal, and so I think that everybody, at this point, like, you ask people, are you going to be going blah 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 back to blah blah blah, and everybody says no. But my opinion is like, that one way or another, this thing's going to wind down by spring or summer of next year, and there's going to be just huge pent-up demand for people to see each other, to go to concerts, to go out and party, to Las Vegas is just going to be this baccalaureate excess for 6 months, and we'll see what of these things stick around. But that example that I gave a few minutes ago of now everybody knows how to use Zoom, that's kind of a big deal. Just that is kind of a big deal, because it means that anybody who's selling stuff knows that the people that, if they send them a Zoom invite, that it's going to work, because everybody got their calendars working. Everybody got the Zoom drivers working. Everybody got all this other stuff going. And just that one thing is a huge deal. And, I think you can just apply everybody learned how to do things remote across all of these industries, and you'll find all kinds of examples of that thing, like the solar stuff that I described, that, doesn't sound like much, but it's ended up, the difference between 75% of the time your customers know how to use Zoom and 100% of the time ends up being a big deal, because it means you can use it as your primary selling tool. And in medicine, it means that, as telehealth, things going to happen. Reimbursement codes have changed. All this other stuff's changed. It's a big deal. And it's probably going to completely reform medicine. And it's going to happen in some deep ways, because all of a sudden primary care is going to benefit from scale in a way that it hasn't before. So there's probably a bigger advantage to being national than there was before. There wasn't an advantage at all being national before. Now all of a sudden it's probably an advantage to being national. So you'll probably see some sort of new companies form, consolidation form, other things that make national networks of providers, because they can reach out to everybody across the country now. And you're going to see your payments are changing. Same thing, like Apple Pay adoption's gone up hugely. People are paying each other over Venmo. You're seeing all of these. My father was a lawyer, very interested in preserving old buildings, and he used to say that new ideas require old buildings. And I think what he meant more broadly is that new ideas require empty space. And one of the things that this pandemic's doing is it's creating a lot of empty space. You're probably going to see, 15, 20, 25, 30% business failure in New York City. And on one hand, that's terrible. But on the other hand, it's just going to shake loose a lot of cruft and stuff that was going to die over the next 10 or 15 years anyway. And your opportunity as someone who's younger and starting companies is to walk into that space, inhabit it, and do something amazing with it. So go do it.
Yeah, I think Dave LaPuma has a question.
Thanks, Aditya, and thanks, Alex, for doing this. I just had a quick question on your background. Obviously, you had an engineering background and then worked in engineering and then transitioned over to Wall Street. Just wondering how you felt like that's impacted your career. Obviously, the finance sector could definitely be following the herd sometimes. So not studying finance and getting into it later, I'm sure has helped you out in your career, kind of having a fresh slate of thinking. So I just kind of wanted to get your opinion and your thoughts about transitioning from engineering over to finance.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think to really make a lot of money and everything, you need to have something you believe in, and you believe in with enough conviction that you're going to be able to go through very difficult times when the price goes down 50%, or they make some huge mistake, and you're really questioning whether they can make it through it. And so you need to have that belief. It needs to be a big idea. You need to believe deeply in it, and also other people have to not quite see it yet, because otherwise the price is, is efficient. It's already there. And yeah, I think having a different background has certainly helped me, think about things a little bit differently and find things a little bit differently. I'm also just a difficult and ornery person, as you know, and I, that makes me, I think it makes me always want to be taking the other side of a group of people, and so I'm just kind of naturally pushed in that direction.
Thank you.
Hashtag difficult and ornery. That's going to be how we're going to promote this.
That's what my wife says.
So yeah, I have one question. Back to the 13F that you talked about earlier. Can you elaborate why in the 13F you guys have Chegg Inc. as one of the companies that you invested in?
Yeah, so Chegg's, it's not my position, but look, our big idea with Chegg, you guys probably all know what Chegg is because you all use it, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. So Chegg's gone through this transformation from selling used textbooks, which was a great business model because the textbook companies charge $70 for something, you use it for one semester, then you never want to see it again. You certainly don't want to carry it around your next apartment. And they've gone through this transformation from that to this online platform that helps students with their assignments. And there's a lot of those same things we were talking about medicine and online in the Chegg Plus Online. And that is, they're taking something that was done very one-off without much scale to it, which is your professor and the 20 or 200 kids in their seminar that year, and turning it into something that then scales across all Chemistry 101 classes across the country. And we're particularly interested in their ability to move from that into tutoring and start to help people out with their coursework and just kind of slowly add scale and automation and software on top of universities, which are something that I think honestly, while a lot of the innovation is invented in universities, the model of delivering university education really hasn't changed very much, and there's probably huge opportunity to change that. Another one we own is 2U, which Case has a program with as well. Same idea there.
Yeah. Back to the university thing. What do you say? Because I want to be also portfolio manager when I grow up, also doing some computer science stuff. What do you say? Experience like Weatherhead Fund and the Northeast Ohio Venture Fund is a good experience to gain when you're in college, or should I look in other areas?
So, Alex, just to clarify, these are two on campus, like the Weather Fund invests in, basically a portfolio of public stocks. The Northeast Ohio Student Venture Fund is it's a venture capital experience for students to invest in startups.
Yeah, look, all that stuff's great. But most of the people I know, my boss studied art history. He doesn't have any formal training at all. And his track record's extraordinary. And a lot of the people in finance that are, a lot of the people who are picking investments that are really good at it have a lot less formal training. But I think what you see across all of them that is, deep curiosity, a deep desire to understand how all these different things work. And I would just follow your curiosity. If your curiosity is to go learn about venture capital and learn all these companies, you're going to see all kinds of cool companies in Northeast Ohio that are doing interesting things. You're going to learn a lot from that. But, if your curiosity is to go, learn about organic chicken farming, go do that for the summer. Just don't stick around too long. Go do something else for another 3 months. And then, the value comes out of, well, I've seen a little bit of this before, and I've seen a little bit of that before. And then you can apply that pattern recognition to new things as it shows up. And you read about something new and you're like, whoa, this is actually pretty important.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's been
Daniel.
But there's no right way to do this. All kinds of people do it different ways.
Mm-hmm. Daniel, do you have any questions that you want to ask?
Yeah. Hey, Alex. Great to see you. Hey, so we get to bump into you at CES almost every year, and you've been coming there for a long time. So just curious about what you're looking for there and what have you found to be most beneficial. That's the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. I mean, what is really your priority and why do you go?
Yeah, I go because the companies that I want to talk to are there, and I typically have a bunch of prearranged meetings. And there's 6 or 7 people that I want to talk to in the same city on the same day, and they're all willing to meet with me. And I spend my day literally running between the Bellagio and Caesars or wherever they've set up these, these suites where the company management is. So that's most of what I get out of it. The show floor has always been difficult for me. The people manning the booths aren't particularly well informed. It's hard to get access to people. It's hard to hear because it's so loud. I find reading the blogs from like Ars Technica and people like that, much better use of my time than wandering around the show floor. But it's an amazing thing because so many people are there at the same time, and that's absolutely fantastic.
So just follow up. Are you going to do the virtual, CES this year? Does that even make sense for you?
I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet. I don't know.
I have a question from India. India, if you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yes. Hi. I had a question about investing. So how do you deal with changes in the economy, in the market, in the world? Say the pandemic, for example, and let's give a future example of a vaccine. Do you predict how the market will react to these sorts of things, or do you look at the changes and then react to the changes? Or like, what's the process for pivoting for your investors to make sure money isn't lost?
Yeah, so we're not trying to make sure money isn't lost. That's not what we do at all. Like, we're trying to make sure that we find a bunch of big opportunities, and we're not spending much time trying to protect against the downside. So, our clients, when they show up, are like, look, investing in the stock market's very dangerous. Any money you give us, you lose a lot of it very quickly. And we're really focusing all of our time on let's invest in things where we can really make a lot of money. And hopefully in the good times, then we'll do great and it'll make up for the bad times. At least that's the theory. That doesn't mean we don't try to adjust. And, in February, in January and February, I was learning more about COVID. I sold the airline we owned. I sold the casino we owned. I shorted a bunch of other airlines. I sold a half dozen other things because I'm like, this seems bad. And, people don't really seem like they're paying enough attention. But now, for example, when everybody's talking about the virus all the time, I'm much more hesitant to make any adjustments about the vaccine because my expectation is, because everybody else is talking about it all the time, that the ideas about when or what or how or why a vaccine comes together are probably very well understood, much better so than I can do, and more priced in. So I think I'm looking for adjustments where I'm really worried about something or I'm really excited about something, and it doesn't seem like everybody else is quite paying enough attention yet. And right now it seems like everybody's paying attention to the virus all the time. So I've kind of tried to just move on and try to find other things. And vaccine comes, vaccine doesn't come, the things will go up and down. Maybe I lose money, maybe I make money because of that, but I'm back to focused on let's find companies that are doing awesome things.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, we have a question from Michael again.
Thank you. If you have a second, I'd love to talk kind of on changes in higher ed. I mean, you mentioned your investment in Chegg and 2U, and obviously given some of the dynamics even before the pandemic and where education might be going, those are two companies sort of well positioned for a lot of the changes that are happening. I mean, a few folks like Scott Galloway and others, there's been some interesting discussions about what this moment means for higher ed. Obviously, whether it's Case Western Reserve or other places where things are changing rapidly. A number of the folks on the call are back in Cleveland and will be on campus. Other folks, like I know Aditya is going to be doing his classes remote. Any perspective on where you think higher ed may be going, just sort of based on what you're seeing and how that's influencing your sort of investment thesis?
Yeah, I don't think I agree with Scott. Okay, so look, I think that that higher education is a branded luxury good, first of all. And, what does that mean? It means that we're incredibly brand sensitive. These schools, Case included, have been around for a long, long time. The name has incredible value, and the price is almost secondary to the amount of time you're spending, at the school. So the other side of that is that we've transitioned from schools have invested, because of the way that schools are ranked and some other things, they've invested just fortunes in improving the non-teaching and non-classroom experience. And you've seen huge cost inflation across higher education as the dorms have gotten better, the athletic facilities have gotten better, all of this other stuff that doesn't really deal with what was originally the core product. But then if you step back a little bit, that kind of is the core product, because it's, you're going to college, especially undergraduate, because it's a safe place to learn how to be an adult and to meet a bunch of interesting people. And so all that secondary stuff is actually pretty important. So you put all of that together, you've got very weak balance sheets across a lot of schools, cases, above that, but very weak balance sheets at a lot of schools. I think this is another example of one of these things that would have happened anyway over the next 5 to 10 years, and now gets accelerated to a period of not very long. But I think we're going to see 10, 15, 20% of schools close and never reopen. I think we're going to see huge transition towards hybrid learning, and that's going to be dominated by the schools with the big brands, because they can attract students more easily. I think Case probably does pretty well in that as kind of a regional powerhouse, if they can adapt to it. So those are some thoughts, kind of focused on undergraduate and graduate school. And I think we're also going to see a change in the types of programs that people sign up for. So yeah, those are some thoughts. I'd love to turn that into a conversation. You guys are much more in the thick of it than I am. So if anybody thinks I'm an idiot, please, unmute your mic and jump down my throat about it. Let's go.
No, you're right. I mean, it's evolving quickly. I mean, I think whether it's graduate education and the business school and some of the dynamics around international students, which, I think many schools, including our own, but others, have been heavily relying on international student populations, that there's a lot of challenges on them getting visas this fall. I mean, there's a number of things at play, and some of it actually changes by the week. But yeah, I agree with all your points.
Yeah, so one final question, and the question is from me. Is there, throughout your entire career that you had right now, is there one moment that stood out to you and you'd like to give to the next generation of investors? Like just one final advice, a small tip.
I just don't file things like that. I'll tell you that the mistakes you make hurt a lot more than the successes feel good. But in the end, I think the better measure of you as a person is how you pick yourself up from those mistakes. You learn from them and you move on, and how you recover from them. And so I guess my advice to anyone, it's the same advice I give my kids, is that bad things are going to happen. You have to take risk, and the best thing you can do is figure out how to deal with the emotional difficulty that comes when you go through a hard time, and take the right lessons from that, which are usually to keep trying, keep failing, and recover.
Yeah, great advice. I'm just reading the comments right now, and I'm giving back to Michael.
Great. Well, very good. Aditya, thank you so much for moderating. I really appreciate it. It's fun to watch students stretch their skill set and doing new things like moderating. So thank you. You did a great job. Alex, it's awesome to reconnect. A lot of thought-provoking things for our students and alums and others that are on the call. We really appreciate everything you do for us on campus. And whether it's this upcoming road trip as you cross the country back to New York, or certainly when things change again, we'd look forward to welcoming you back to Cleveland and to campus soon.
Fantastic. And we do have an internship program. So if anybody's looking for something to do for a month or two, we're looking for weirdos. So if you think you're weird enough, send me an email.
Nice. And Daniel, you already have a day job, so I know you want to.
No, but I'd actually like to take a break and have an internship there, especially if you got to be weird. That sounds very attractive.
You're perfect.
I think you can handle it. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, Alex, for that offer, and I'm sure some students will be following up for sure. Let me just make a couple of announcements about upcoming events we've got upcoming for the Veale Institute. Join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We're going to be joined by an awesome alum, Victoria Lipschitz, who's the founder of Grid Dynamics, is going to talk about entrepreneurship in the tech sector. And then next week, we have several events. Next Monday at 1 o'clock, one of my former students, Jose Diaz Salazar, who's with Goodyear's Innovation Lab out in San Francisco, is going to talk about design and innovation out in Silicon Valley. And then Tuesday, we have a fun session also at 1 o'clock with Courtney Kingston, who is with Kingston Family Vineyard. So she's a Stanford MBA who got into her family's wine business. She's a friend of mine from college, lived down the hall, so that'll be a fun session. And then next Wednesday, as part of our Veale Skills Lab, we'll have a discussion with two of my colleagues, Maggie Smith and Poppleton, talking about marketing your project, marketing yourself. So that is all next week. So for those, as we head into the semester, it's great that folks are willing to spend time with us. And again, Aditya and Alex, thanks for doing this today, and look forward to seeing everybody soon.